The chapel was quiet, the kind of silence that presses down on your chest and makes every breath feel heavy. Outside, the sky hung low and gray, as if mourning alongside the gathered crowd. Inside, the soft murmur of whispered condolences had faded, replaced by a solemn stillness that filled every corner. Faces blurred together, some streaked with tears, others set in stoic grief. The scent of lilies mingled with polished wood and the faint, lingering trace of my mother's favorite perfume, now a ghost of a presence. I sat rigid, hands folded in my lap, feeling the weight of the moment settle deep into my bones. I glanced around, catching fragments of conversations that had already quieted into uncomfortable glances. Old family friends exchanged cautious looks, and distant relatives shuffled papers or adjusted their attire, as if the ceremony itself was an unbearable burden. Somewhere behind me, a child whimpered softly, instantly hushed by a nearby adult. The air was thick with unspoken things, regrets, silences, and memories too fragile to share aloud. Every heartbeat echoed loudly in my ears, underscoring the gulf between the words spoken in eulogies and the truths kept locked away. Then, just as the minister's voice softened, offering a prayer that seemed to stretch on forever, I felt a subtle movement beside me. My daughter leaned in, her breath warm against my ear in the otherwise cold stillness. Her voice was barely audible, so quiet it could have been mistaken for the shifting of fabric or the rustle of a page turning. Yet the words she chose pierced straight through the fragile veil of mourning. "You don't belong here." The sentence hung in the air, a sharp and sudden fracture in the fragile calm. Shock rooted me to the spot. My mind scrambled for a response, for any sign that this was a mistake, a cruel joke born of grief or confusion. I searched her face, looking for something, anything, that might explain the cruelty behind those whispered words. Instead, I found only an unyielding hardness, a cold certainty that left no room for dialogue or defense. My throat tightened. Humiliation bloomed quietly, a painful blush of invisibility in a place where I should have felt most seen. The world around me blurred, the faces and voices fading into an indistinct haze. No one else noticed. The moment was mine alone, a private wound inflicted in the midst of public sorrow. I sat frozen, speechless, the words echoing relentlessly in the hollow space between us. It was a moment that demanded explanation, yet none came. The ceremony moved on, prayers concluded, and people rose to leave, but I remained suspended in that breathless pause, grappling with a truth that had yet to reveal itself. Somewhere beneath the calm surface of grief, something was unraveling, and I was caught in its silent wake, waiting for the story that had been kept so carefully hidden to finally come to light. It's in these quiet spaces between words and gestures that so many of us find ourselves, standing on the edge of something unspoken, feeling the weight of being seen but not quite understood. Moments like these, when family gatherings shift from warmth to distance without warning, are far more common than anyone admits. The silence can feel like a wall, thick and impenetrable, built from countless small rejections that accumulate over time, often unnoticed by everyone except the one who bears them. If you've ever sat in a room full of relatives and felt invisible, or heard words that left you more alone than comforted, you're not alone. This story isn't just about one family's hidden truths. It's a mirror reflecting the unspoken fractures many carry beneath the surface. I invite you to stay with me through the unfolding of what lies beneath that first moment, because the meaning of what you saw or thought you saw will shift in ways you never expected. What begins as a silent, almost invisible fracture will reveal itself in layers, challenging everything we assume about belonging, loyalty, and love. If you've ever felt erased, misunderstood, or pushed aside within the very family that should have embraced you, please consider liking this video. It's a quiet act of solidarity, a way to say, "I see you, and you are not alone." And if you find yourself relating deeply, maybe for the first time out loud, please share your thoughts in the comments. Your story matters, even if it's never been spoken before. Together, we can create a space where these quiet wounds no longer have to be carried in silence. This is not just a story to watch. It's one to feel, to reflect on, and to hold close as the truth unfolds. The moment those words landed, a peculiar stillness settled inside me, heavier than any silence I had known before. It wasn't anger or outward outrage that surged through my veins, but rather a quiet numbness that seemed to swallow every fragment of my being. My mind struggled to grasp the reality of what had been said, as if my thoughts were caught in a fog that dulled the edges of comprehension. The disbelief was not loud or frantic. It was a slow, sinking sensation, like the ground beneath me had shifted without warning, leaving me unmoored in a place I didn't recognize. I found myself retreating inward, where questions began to circle relentlessly. How could this be happening now, when grief had already carved such deep valleys in my heart? What had I done to deserve this rejection from the person I loved most? These questions offered no comfort, only the hollow echo of uncertainty that seemed to reverberate endlessly within. In that space, every memory, every shared moment, weighed heavily against the starkness of the rejection. The contrast was unbearable, amplifying the sense of loss in ways words could never fully capture. There was a rawness beneath the surface, a vulnerability that I hadn't anticipated in my child's voice. It was not just a refusal or a denial. It felt like a severing, a quiet but profound dismissal of all the love and care I had tried to offer. Yet, even as the pain settled in, it was accompanied by an unexpected gentleness within myself. I didn't lash out or seek to defend what had been said. Instead, I allowed the silence to hold me, to let the stillness speak the truth of what I was feeling. This was not a moment for confrontation, but for bearing witness to a fracture that had quietly grown too large to ignore. In the aftermath, I noticed how the numbness was not emptiness but a fragile shield. It protected me from being completely overwhelmed while simultaneously inviting a slow, painful reckoning. I began to see the layers beneath the rejection, the fear, the confusion, the grief that must have been tangled up in my child's words. This recognition did not make the hurt disappear, but it softened the edges of despair, creating a space where empathy could quietly take root. I realized that in this shared grief, both of us were lost in ways that words could only partially express. As I sat with these feelings, I was struck by the subtle but profound impact of being unseen at a moment when all I needed was to be held in the light of understanding. The rejection was not just a refusal of comfort. It was an erasure, a moment where my grief was met with a wall instead of a bridge. This left me questioning not only my relationship with my child but also my own sense of worthiness. Was I enough? Did I matter in the way I had hoped? These questions lingered, not as accusations, but as quiet reflections born from the depths of a wounded heart. And yet, beneath the devastation, a faint thread of hope persisted. A hope that even in silence, in distance, in the pain of being turned away, there might still be a path back to connection. That this moment, as shattering as it was, could eventually become a catalyst for understanding, for healing, for a new kind of closeness that neither of us had dared to imagine before. Until then, I carried the quiet ache of that day inside me, a testament to the complex, fragile nature of love under the same roof, where grief and rejection can coexist in a fragile, unspoken dance. Before my mother's death, the relationship with my daughter was marked by a subtle but persistent emotional distance. We lived under the same roof, yet there often seemed to be an invisible barrier between us, one built not of hatred or anger, but of unspoken grievances and unmet expectations. Our conversations were typically polite and surface level, missing the warmth and openness I had hoped we'd naturally share. I sensed her hesitation to fully engage, as if she was holding back pieces of herself, wary of exposing vulnerabilities that might lead to conflict or disappointment. There were moments when tension quietly simmered beneath the surface, unresolved issues that lingered like shadows. Small disagreements would flare up, then quickly subside without genuine resolution, leaving a residue of frustration and sadness. I remember one afternoon when I tried to talk about my mother's declining health, hoping to invite her into a shared space of concern, but she brushed it off, her responses curt and distant. It wasn't overt rejection, but the coldness in her voice made me realize how far apart we had drifted. Looking back, I now see those instances as early warning signs, glimpses of a fracture that would later widen in ways I never anticipated. Despite these strains, I never imagined that the rejection I faced after my mother's death would be so profound. Our relationship was imperfect, yes, but I believed that beneath the surface, there was a foundation strong enough to withstand grief. I thought our shared loss might bring us closer, or at least allow us to support each other through it. Instead, her withdrawal and refusal to engage left me blindsided, shaking the very core of my understanding of our bond. It was as if years of quiet distance suddenly erupted into a wall of silence that I couldn't break through. Still, there were moments I now regard with bittersweet clarity. Small acts that, at the time, seemed ordinary but now feel laden with meaning. The way she would sometimes linger near me in the kitchen, sharing a fleeting smile before retreating. The brief, hesitant text she sent that never quite made it to a full conversation. The times she looked my way with a flicker of recognition that quickly vanished. Each of these now feels like a fragile thread connecting us, a reminder that the love between us, though complicated, was never entirely extinguished. In hindsight, I realized that the emotional distance and unresolved tension were symptoms of deeper, unspoken wounds that neither of us had the courage to confront. I had hoped my daughter would be my ally in mourning, but instead, I found myself navigating grief alone, carrying the weight of rejection alongside the loss of my mother. It was a harsh awakening to the complexities of family ties, where love can be both a source of comfort and pain, often existing simultaneously in the same breath. This unexpected rejection forced me to reevaluate everything I thought I knew about our relationship. It revealed how fragile our connection truly was and how much healing was needed, not just for the past, but for the future. Even amidst the hurt, I held onto a quiet hope that this fracture might one day become the space where we begin to rebuild, where understanding could replace silence, and where the love between mother and daughter could find a new way to breathe. The days that followed felt suspended in a fragile stillness, as if time itself was holding its breath. My mother's presence, once so vibrant and unshakable, had softened into something delicate yet profoundly clear. We spent hours sitting together in the quiet of the living room, the hum of the outside world fading into the background. Our conversations were slower now, measured, as if each word carried the weight of unspoken truths. She rarely spoke of the past anymore, but when she did, her voice held a bittersweet tenderness. I remember one afternoon, as sunlight spilled through the curtains, she reached out and gently took my hand. "Do you remember that summer we spent by the lake?" she asked softly. Her eyes shone with a clarity I hadn't seen in weeks. How the world seemed endless then, and nothing could touch us. I nodded, the memory vivid, the warmth of the sun, the sound of water lapping against the shore, our laughter mingling with the wind. It was a moment that felt like a lifeline, a bridge between who we were and who we had become. Yet beneath those shared memories, I sensed a quiet undercurrent of worry. She was more aware than she let on, more attuned to the tensions simmering beneath our family's surface. One evening, as twilight settled, she looked at me with a knowing gaze. "I see the way things are," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The things left unsaid, the walls we build around each other." It was neither a reproach nor a plea, but a simple acknowledgement of the fractures she could no longer ignore. There were moments when her emotions flickered with surprising sharpness, an almost painful clarity that cut through the haze of illness. She asked about my siblings, about how we were managing, and in those questions I understood her fears, not just for herself but for the family she was leaving behind. "Promise me," she said one night, "that you'll find a way to keep us together, even when I'm not here to remind you." Her words hung in the air, fragile yet insistent, like a seed planted in the soil of uncertainty. Despite the looming shadows, there was an unspoken grace in those final days. We found comfort in simple routines, her favorite tea, the soft music she loved, the photos scattered across the coffee table. Sometimes, she would close her eyes and smile as if reliving a cherished moment from long ago. And in those smiles, I sensed a quiet acceptance, a surrender not to defeat but to the natural course of life. Our conversations, though sparse, grew richer in meaning. She shared little pieces of wisdom, reflections that felt like gifts. "Life is fragile," she said once. "But love is what holds us up when everything else feels like it's falling apart." It was a truth I clung to desperately, the anchor in a sea of uncertainty. As the days slipped by, I became more attuned to the subtle signals. How she bristled slightly when family matters were mentioned. The way her eyes darkened with concern whenever conflict arose. It was clear she feared the fractures might deepen, that her absence could leave wounds too raw to heal. Yet beneath that fear lay a profound hope, a hope that we could find a path forward, that the love we shared could outlast even the deepest divides. In those final moments, her emotional clarity was both a comfort and a challenge. She was no longer the woman who shielded us from pain, but the one who faced it head-on, urging us to do the same. And though the road ahead was uncertain, her presence remained a beacon, a reminder that even in the quietest of goodbyes, love endures. In the quiet hours of that evening, when the house had settled into a fragile stillness, I found myself alone with her. The weight of unspoken words hung between us, heavy yet necessary. She looked at me with eyes that held a mixture of exhaustion and determination, as if she carried the burden of years, yet was resolute in the moments that remained. It was a conversation that no one knew about, a private exchange that revealed her true intentions, far from the assumptions others might have made. She began by speaking softly about the family, about the fractures that had long been present but were rarely addressed openly. Her voice carried no bitterness, only a profound understanding of the complex dynamics that had shaped our lives. "I know things haven't been easy," she said, "and I know that sometimes silence felt like the only way to keep peace, but peace built on silence isn't real peace." She wanted us to see the truth of our history, not to dredge up pain for its own sake, but so that the wounds might finally be acknowledged and, perhaps, begin to heal. Her wish was not to settle old scores or to cast blame, but to protect us in a way that went beyond mere safety from harm. It was about safeguarding our future, so that the next generation would not carry the same burdens, the same unspoken fears. She spoke of legacy not as something material or superficial, but as a thread of honesty and resilience woven through the family's fabric. "I want you to have the truth," she said, "because only truth can set you free, not to hurt anyone, but to help you understand where we came from and who we really are." There was a quiet urgency in her words, a desire to leave behind something more enduring than memories clouded by misconception. She acknowledged her own imperfections and the mistakes she had made, but she also emphasized the strength she saw in us, the capacity to rise above the fractures. "I'm not asking you to forget," she explained, "but to forgive and to carry forward what is good, even when it's hard." She spoke of protection as an act of courage rather than control, a way to shield us not by hiding the truth, but by preparing us to face it with open eyes. She wanted the family to be bound by understanding, not by silence or avoidance. "We're under the same roof in more ways than one," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "And that means we have to face the storms together, even when it hurts." In those moments, her clarity was profound. It was not revenge or resentment that motivated her final wishes, but a deep, abiding love, one that sought to heal rather than harm, to build bridges instead of walls. She hoped that by sharing what she had kept inside for so long, she could help us find a path forward, grounded in honesty and compassion. As the night deepened, our conversation drew to a close, but its impact lingered. Her intentions were laid bare, a testament to her unyielding hope for the family's future. In that private space, away from the eyes of others, she entrusted me with a piece of her soul, a legacy of truth, protection, and enduring love that would guide us long after she was gone. The funeral was shrouded in a heavy silence, punctuated only by soft murmurs and the occasional rustle of leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. When the moment came that I heard the humiliating words thrown in my direction, a sharp sting threatened to break through my composure, but I remained still, rooted in place. It wasn't out of weakness or an inability to defend myself. Rather, it was a deliberate choice grounded in restraint and respect. The solemnity of the occasion demanded a different kind of strength, one that transcended the immediate urge to respond, to argue, or to retaliate. I understood that this was not the time or place for confrontation. In that moment, I felt the weight of more than just the insult itself. This was a gathering to honor a life that had touched so many, a final farewell to someone whose memory deserved dignity above all else. To speak out, especially with anger or defensiveness, would have been to overshadow the very purpose of the day. I chose silence because I recognized the importance of preserving the sanctity of the moment, allowing others space to grieve without distraction. Sometimes silence is the loudest statement a person can make. It conveys a depth of understanding that words simply cannot capture. Beyond respect for the occasion, I also sought to maintain control over my own emotions. Being humiliated publicly, especially in front of family and friends, can provoke a torrent of feelings: shame, frustration, hurt. But I reminded myself that emotional control is a form of empowerment. By refusing to let my feelings dictate my actions, I reclaimed my agency. My silence was not a surrender. It was an assertion of my inner strength. I was choosing to rise above the pettiness and preserve my peace, rather than allow someone else's cruelty to define how I responded. Additionally, I recognized that any response I might have given would only fuel further discord. In a gathering already heavy with sorrow, adding conflict would have served no one. Silence, in this context, became a shield, protecting not only myself but also the fragile bonds holding the family together. It was a conscious act of patience and wisdom, a refusal to let momentary pain fracture relationships that mattered deeply. In the days that followed, I reflected on how society often misconstrues silence as passivity or weakness. But in truth, silence can be a profound act of strength and resilience. It requires patience to hold back, courage to withstand provocation, and clarity to see beyond the immediate moment. My silence at the funeral was all of these things. It was my way of honoring the past, safeguarding the present, and choosing a path forward defined by dignity rather than discord. Ultimately, staying silent allowed me to hold space for the love and memories that filled the room that day. It preserved the integrity of the farewell and reminded me that sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. In choosing not to engage, I found a quiet strength that spoke louder than any words could. In the days that followed my mother's passing, as the house grew quieter and the bustle of visitors lessened, I discovered a small envelope tucked away in the side drawer of her nightstand. It was unassuming, no more than a plain manila folder, sealed neatly and addressed simply to me. The handwriting was unmistakably hers, steady and deliberate, as if she had taken great care to compose this final message. I approached it with a mixture of hesitation and reverence, unsure of what to expect yet certain that whatever lay inside was meant to guide me through the days ahead. Inside the folder was a letter, its pages filled with her calm, measured words. She began by acknowledging the complexity of the family's history, the intertwining threads of love and misunderstanding that had shaped our lives. Her tone was gentle, never accusatory, and there was an unmistakable sense that she wanted to create a space where healing could begin rather than wounds could deepen. The letter was not a list of grievances or a catalog of regrets. Instead, it was a thoughtful articulation of boundaries she wished to establish for the sake of everyone's peace of mind. She asked that certain matters remain private, specifying that some memories and conversations, though painful, were hers alone to bear. This request was not about silencing anyone but about preserving dignity, ensuring that the intimate details of her life would not be dissected or used as weapons in future disputes. She understood how the temptation to revisit old hurts might arise, but she implored her loved ones to resist, to honor the sanctity of her final days by focusing on the love that endured rather than the conflicts that had sometimes overshadowed it. Her letter also included practical instructions, details about the care of family heirlooms, arrangements for personal belongings, and guidance on how she wished her legacy to be remembered. These were conveyed with clarity and kindness, underscoring her desire to prevent confusion or disagreements that could fracture the family further. It was evident that she had anticipated potential tensions and sought to preempt them not by imposing strict rules but by offering clear direction rooted in respect. Most poignantly, she expressed her hope that we would find strength in compassion and understanding, reminding me that forgiveness was not about forgetting, but about freeing ourselves from the weight of resentment. Her words were a quiet invitation to choose empathy over anger, connection over estrangement. There was no demand for restitution or retribution, only a heartfelt wish that the family might move forward with gentleness and grace. Reading her letter, I felt a profound sense of peace. This final request was not a burden but a gift, a carefully crafted framework intended to protect what was most precious, our shared humanity. It was a testament to her enduring love, an act of care even in absence, guiding us to honor her memory with integrity and kindness. In embracing her wishes, I found not only clarity but also a renewed commitment to uphold the dignity she so deeply valued. The room held a stillness that seemed heavier than before. As the letter's final lines settled into the air, a quiet ripple of realization began to spread among us. At first, it was subtle, an exchanged glance here, a slight hesitation there. But soon, the weight of her words pressed upon each of us in ways we hadn't anticipated. The final request wasn't merely a closing chapter. It was an invitation to see everything anew, to reconsider the foundation upon which we had built our understanding of her, of ourselves, and of what lay ahead. No one spoke immediately. The silence stretched, punctuated only by the occasional sound of shifting feet or a soft, uncertain breath. It was as though the family was collectively holding its breath, grappling with a truth that had quietly woven itself into the fabric of the moment. Confusion flickered briefly, questions unspoken but deeply felt. Why now? Why this particular request? What did it truly mean for us going forward? The answers weren't clear, and that ambiguity both unsettled and intrigued us. Slowly, small shifts began to emerge in the way we occupied the space. My father's hands, which had been tightly clenched moments before, relaxed just slightly, fingers brushing against the edge of the table as if seeking some tangible anchor. My siblings exchanged looks that were less guarded than before, as though the letter had cracked a barrier they hadn't realized was there. It wasn't the kind of revelation that demanded immediate confrontation or dramatic upheaval. Instead, it worked its way beneath the surface, quietly altering the rhythms of our interaction. I noticed my mother's old rocking chair, empty now, seemed to hold a new kind of significance. The gentle creak it made as it swayed invited contemplation rather than sorrow. It was a symbol of continuity, a reminder that although she was no longer physically present, the essence of her wishes could still guide us. In that moment, the past and future felt less separate, linked by the responsibility she entrusted to us. As the evening deepened, so did our understanding. The request wasn't just a set of instructions. It was a call to embody the values she cherished, to carry forward a legacy defined not by loss but by love and respect. The confusion gave way to a quiet acceptance, and with that came a subtle but profound change in how we related to one another. Conversations became more measured, less reactive. We began to listen differently, not just to words, but to the silences between them. No one claimed to have all the answers, nor did anyone rush to impose interpretations. Instead, the truth unfolded gradually, like dawn breaking slowly over a horizon we hadn't yet fully seen. It was a process that required patience and trust in each other, and in the enduring bond that had always held us together, even through moments of uncertainty. By the time the night had fully settled, the family had moved beyond mere understanding. We had begun to embody the spirit of her request, stepping softly into a new chapter marked by empathy and intention. The truth, once a silent guest in the room, was now a shared presence, quiet, steady, and deeply transformative. The days that followed unfolded with a quiet intensity, revealing layers of understanding that had long remained beneath the surface. Grief, in its raw and unyielding form, laid bare the delicate architecture of our family. It was no longer just about sorrow. It was about how we chose to carry that sorrow together, honoring not only the memory of the one we lost, but also the dignity of every person still standing within the same walls. In those moments, I saw how respect extends far beyond polite words. It is an active practice, a commitment to honor boundaries even when emotions threaten to unravel us. Boundaries became both fragile and necessary. We learned, sometimes painfully, that grieving does not follow a uniform timeline or script. Some needed silence, others conversation. Some sought the comfort of solitude, while others required connection. To respect these differences was to acknowledge each person's humanity in its fullest complexity. This wasn't always easy. There were misunderstandings and moments where patience frayed. Yet each time we managed to step back and listen, to give space without judgment, we wove a stronger fabric of trust. It was in these small acts, offering a hand without pressing, speaking without demanding answers, that we rebuilt the scaffolding of our family. Dignity emerged as a quiet but powerful force in this process. Witnessing how each family member grappled with their grief, I realized dignity is not diminished by vulnerability. Rather, it is reinforced when we allow ourselves to be seen as we truly are. We shed the masks of stoicism or bravado and embraced a more authentic presence. This authenticity fostered deeper connections, reminding us that respect is not transactional but relational. It thrives in the soil of empathy, watered by the willingness to meet one another's pain with gentleness rather than impatience. The dynamics within our family also shifted under the weight of loss. Old roles and unspoken expectations surfaced, sometimes clashing, sometimes harmonizing in unexpected ways. The loss seemed to recalibrate our interactions, forcing us to confront unresolved tensions and long-held assumptions. It was a humbling experience to witness how grief can both expose fractures and create openings for reconciliation. We became more attuned to the nuances of each other's needs, learning that respect requires ongoing attention and adaptation, especially when the past shadows the present. Through this journey, I discovered that family is not just a static group bound by blood or history, but a living, evolving entity shaped by how we honor each other's dignity and boundaries in times of trial. The way we respond to loss reveals the true measure of our respect, not just for the person who has passed, but for those who remain. It is in the deliberate choice to hold space for one another's grief, to resist the urge to fix or minimize pain, that respect finds its deepest expression. As we moved forward, the lessons embedded in our shared experience became guiding principles. We learned to value presence over perfection, to embrace silence as a form of support, and to recognize that respect is, above all, an act of love. Family, I realized, is a sanctuary not because it is free of hardship, but because it is a place where dignity and understanding endure, even when everything else feels uncertain. This revelation, quietly unfolding beneath the surface of our grief, would continue to shape us long after the immediate storm had passed. Choosing to move forward with dignity instead of bitterness wasn't easy. The temptation to respond with anger or resentment lingered, especially when I felt invisible or erased by those I once trusted. But I realized that holding on to bitterness only chained me to the pain and kept me from healing. True strength came from reclaiming my narrative, setting clear boundaries to protect my emotional well-being, and nurturing a quiet resilience within myself. This journey wasn't about forcing forgiveness or pretending everything was okay. It was about honoring my own worth and refusing to let the shadows of the past define my future. Healing, I discovered, isn't a linear path. It's a series of small, intentional steps, choosing self-compassion on difficult days, seeking support when I needed it, and allowing myself to grieve without guilt. Boundaries became essential tools, not walls to shut others out, but safeguards to maintain my peace and dignity. By clearly defining what was acceptable and what wasn't, I created a space where respect could grow, even if it wasn't always reciprocated. This wasn't about controlling others, but about taking responsibility for my own emotional health. Personal growth emerged from this process as a quiet transformation. I learned to value my own presence and voice, recognizing that my story mattered even if others tried to erase it. I found strength in vulnerability, courage in honesty, and peace in acceptance. The family I once longed to fix or change became a reflection of my own growth, imperfect but evolving, marked by moments of grace amid ongoing challenges. If you've ever felt erased by your family, you're not alone. Your pain is valid, and your story deserves to be heard. I invite you to share your experience in the comments below. Let's build a community of understanding and support. If this message resonates with you or someone you know, please share this video to spread hope and strength. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that honor truth, dignity, and the quiet strength that comes from choosing healing over revenge. Together, we can reclaim our narratives and move forward with courage and grace.